Hello, hello, hello everybody. It is me, Ashito Cincolitos, and thank you so much for clicking on this video. So I talk about pre-med stuff, med school life, being a model in New York City, and hair stuff, and anything else I feel like talking about. So if you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new here, welcome back. Welcome back, boy. I'm so glad that you're here. Yeah, because today I'm going to dive into a few things about just reflecting on my first semester of medical school, because it has been a roller coaster. We're going to get into my mindset going into medical school, things that I've learned, things that I wish I knew before actually starting this journey, and things of that nature. So without wasting any more time, let's get started. But before we get started, have you subscribed yet? Have you liked this video? Are you commenting down below? Just wondering. Because, you know, those are the types of things that make my day. So, I hope that you do that, and I hope that you enjoy this video. So now we're actually gonna get started. Okay, I'll see you in a bit. So yes, we are done with my first semester of medical school. Can you believe it? Oh, it's crazy. And kind of exciting, but also kind of scary and crazy, and like there's a lot of emotions going on. But yes, your girl Ash, she finished her first semester of medical school. So let's talk about exactly how it went. But before we actually get into like how it went, I want to talk about like where my mind was going into medical school. Even though it was ages ago, back in August, your girl was burnt out. Let's be real. Just kind of thinking about like where my mind was going into medical school. Just coming out of like the application year, for anybody who's going in, prepare yourself. For anybody who's going through it, you know what I'm talking about. That was difficult. So just going into medical school, I was tired. I felt burnt out from just nonstop interviews, info sessions, meet and greets, just like a full year of just like not knowing where I'm gonna end up, where I'm gonna be moving to. So once I finally knew that I was going to the school that I go to, it was kind of like peace, like a sigh of relief, but also just, I was tired. So that was part of my mindset going in. But at the same time, and like if you've seen my other videos, you know what my path looked like. I got a lot of acceptances to different medical schools. So I was feeling confident, and I was feeling like, wow, the world is really my oyster, and like I can do so much. And so like that was also really nice. So it was just kind of like balancing, like I'm burned out, but I'm also inspired to like just be anything. So that was kind of nice. So just going into medical school, like that was how I felt. Then when it came time for orientation, y'all saw my orientation video. I didn't feel like making no friends. I was just feeling like getting through it day by day. I had my roommates as my friends, and I didn't need anybody else, but we made a lot of friends. And going into medical school, let's talk about the first classes that I took, because from one medical school to the next, this is all going to differ depending on where you go. But the first class that we ran into here was structures. And structures is composed of anatomy, embryology, and histology. So all of those were crammed together, and we took that over the course of, I think it was 8 weeks, right? Went into structures. I was a little bit nervous. I hunkered down. I studied. Y'all already know I failed my first exam, and I made a whole video about that. And then after that, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna meet people, I'm gonna connect, and I'm gonna go have some fun. And I sure did that. I did that. And you know what? Maybe that wasn't exactly the right game plan to go about for the first class of medical school. That didn't exactly work out in my favor. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, regardless of the fact, I struggled academically in that first class a lot. It was just a huge struggle. It was so much information. And I realized that it was a lot of information, but not a lot of time to actually study it because of all the time that we were spending in the lab and in the classroom. And I was like, oh my gosh, so much information overload, but like, when do I actually have time to like review this and piece it together and all of that stuff? Because none of the exams even or quizzes were cumulative. So I feel like in undergrad and in my post-bac, I learned a lot when it came time to study for the final, and you had to put things together, and everything kind of built on each other. But we didn't necessarily have that here. It was just kind of like you took an exam and you moved on to the next one. Took the exam, moved on to the next one. So I never really got the opportunity to piece things together. So that's something that I'm definitely going to work on in the next semester, and we'll get to that later. But that was structure. So after that first exam where I really hunkered down and I did nothing but study afterwards, I was like, listen, I'm still a human and I'm still gonna go do things. So I started going to my castings again. I started recording YouTube videos again. And I think that I leaned a little bit too much onto that side of like, I'm gonna do life now. And that's just something that you learn, like, you have to really find like that balance in terms of balancing life and medical school at the same time. So it just so happened that I ended up going to the most fashion shows that, getting casted for the most fashion shows that I've ever been casted for. Which is funny, because all those years that I wasn't really doing much, and I was showing up to all those castings, I didn't get casted for all these things. And then the minute that I'm in medical school, I show up to castings, and now I get casted for all of these shows. And y'all have seen my runway shows and like my modeling shows, like, those are whole day events. So I just didn't say no to these. I showed up, and like, that cost me in the end. So I did learn in structures that when you are a medical student, yes, you can still have your life. Yes, you can still have fun, but you have to prioritize school first. And especially as your first class in medical school, make sure that you're acclimated to school. Make sure that you're really focusing on your learning styles before you dive, you know, continue on with like all your other activities and things like that. I had plans to join Krav Maga, Jiu-Jitsu, yada yada, wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. That didn't happen. It didn't, but that's okay. But then we moved on to MIKG, which was like molecular and cellular genomics in that portion of medical school. And that was good. That was a little bit better. My grades improved a little bit, but it still wasn't the best. And at that point in time, I hunkered down and I was studying. I wasn't going to castings anymore. I was just kind of like, listen, we're a medical student now, and we're going to pretend, we're not going to pretend, but we're going to act like a medical student now. So that's kind of where I went with MIKG. And I did see a better outcome. Not as good as I wanted it to be, but good enough. And sometimes like that's all you need in medical school. So as you've already seen from my other videos, the academic portion of medical school, it's just like they explain it to you. It's like drinking water from a fire hose. There's so much information coming at you nonstop. I went in with the attitude of like, yeah, I'm just here to learn. And the grades might not be excellent, but I'm here to learn and be an excellent physician one day. And after you fail enough times, that becomes harder and harder to like really internalize, because they really beat you down with these exams. But I do kind of still have that attitude at some level, surprisingly. But I will not lie to you, and I will not say that I don't get frustrated, because I did get frustrated so many times when I studied for like 70 hours in that week or whatever, only to get questions on these exams that felt like trivia. And I'm just kind of like, listen, you focus so much on this part of the lecture and on this part of this block material, only to ask me this little detail of the detail of the detail of the detail of the detail of this thing that you didn't even talk about in the lecture. It just showed up on a PowerPoint slide. Yeah, so that was frustrating in itself. So it's just kind of like also finding that balance between I want to learn and I want to do well and I want to find joy in this learning process, but I also need to pass these exams, and like it's difficult to pass these exams sometimes. So just finding that balance has also been difficult, but not impossible. But something that makes things a little bit less difficult, in my opinion, has been the community. That's something that's really kept me going. Just the friends that I've made here, because I've made so many friends here. Just within the last semester, so many really close friends who just get it. And that's just been a game changer. And like, even though I struggle academically, just waking up every morning, I'm just like, I'm so glad that I chose this school. And I feel like I really made the right decision. The most important thing that you can find in a school is the relationship between the students in the class, because those are the people who you spend all your time with, right? Because you go to lecture for a few hours a day, sure, maybe even if you show up to office hours, you might develop a relationship with a professor, but at the end of the day, you spend your time with the students who go there. So I'm so lucky that the students who go to my school, they are of just diamond quality, and they really hold it down. And honestly, at this school that I go to, like, there's a lot of dinners that we have together. There's a lot of potlucks. There's a lot of movie nights. There's a lot of just going ice skating and just like random stuff that we do that we've done throughout the semester. And like, as much as I'm just like, oh, I gotta study, I gotta do this and I gotta do that, that's what's been keeping me grounded, and that's what's been keeping me sane. Because you need distractions in medical school. That's what I've learned, because otherwise it gets dark. and it gets hard and it gets isolating. And so sometimes you just have to lean into the distractions that your friends sometimes present to you. Yeah, so that's also been a learning process, just not guilting myself for saying yes to dinner with friends, to saying yes to a walk through the park with my friends. Because at the end of the day, and something that my good friend Byeeeeeeee, who's a 4th year here, she told me, like, the things that you will remember at the end of these 4 years will not be that time that you spent an extra 2 hours studying for this exam or an extra 4 hours just prepping in the lab for this thing. It's going to be the time that you spent with people and the memories that you've made with people. So that's been something that I've really tried to internalize over the last semester. And because of that, like, I have so many friends that have really actually supported me through like my academic struggles and like checked in on me, especially when I went into isolation at the end of the semester because I got COVID and I was separated. So many of my friends checked in on me and they brought me things, they delivered things to me, and like just made me feel like I was part of a community in a way that I haven't really felt in my undergrad experience, my high school experience, or even my post-bac experience. So that has been like one of the resounding takeaways from this semester, just like there's a community here and I feel part of something and I don't feel alone in the struggle. So that has been, so as bad as it has been academically, because it has been a roller coaster of a ride this semester, the overarching theme is that it has been an amazing experience, and I'm really grateful for it. So now I want to get into a little bit of what I've learned throughout the semester, because I've learned so many things. When you fail so many times, you really start learning lessons. And I'm glad that these lessons came earlier rather than later. But just when people do give you advice, definitely take it with a grain of salt. Be open to listening to people's experiences and keep it in mind and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you have to forge your own path because you're the only one who knows how your brain works. So it's just kind of like nobody's experience is going to be identical, right? And people might have experienced one thing being helpful and yada yada, but I feel like it's just such an individual experience going through medical school that like you have to just, as much as you can before you start, just try to figure out like who you are as a learner, how you learn best, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and just try to be fluid with that, because what worked with me for the MCAT, what worked with me for my post-bac, that didn't necessarily work for me with structures. And when I finally learned like what worked for me with structures, did that help me with MIG-G, the second class that we took? Not necessarily. So just things like that, like you have to be mindful that like you have to be flexible and you have to be willing to change quickly. Try not to get so much resource overload when people start shoving like so many resources in your face. Just be calm. Take people's advice, listen to it, but at the end of the day, you have to know yourself. The next thing that I learned that was kind of surprising is just the idea that, you know how when you're pre-med and you're looking for people to shadow and you're looking for research and yada, 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 and you're struggling to just get somebody to email you back, you don't have that issue as much in medical school. Instead, you have professors who lecture to you and then they're telling you like, hey, reach out to me, come shadow me, come do this with me, yada, 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 I want to see you. And like, it's like every time you email somebody, people are just, they want to work with you since you're a medical student. And you have that like MD candidate attached to your name. It's a different world out here and like you have so many opportunities available to you. However, you have to find the time for them. And that has been the hardest part of the first semester. At the end of my first semester, and listen, this is just me because I know like some other peers of mine have had different experiences, but like I still have not shadowed. I still have not seen the inside of an OR, things like that. And it's just kind of like I'm trying to like survive academically. And even though I have so many people who are available to like bring me under their wing and like show me how things work, it's just hard to find the time. So it goes from like pre-med years where it's like you have the time but you don't have people answering you back and the opportunity to actually get in somewhere in shadow. And then you're in medical school where you have the opportunity to get in and shadow and like you have these people who will email you back. But between 3-hour labs and 4 hours of lecture, like how? It's nice to know that the opportunity is there, but I'm still trying to figure out how to balance like school and like my academic responsibilities with also trying to figure out and navigate like what I want to do as a career one day and exploring those different fields. Like a huge part of why I'm here and why I chose this school is because I want to explore and I want to find a field that fits me. Another thing that I came across lately when I was rewatching an old lecture from like the first few weeks of medical school is a really important point that one of our professors brought up to us, a young professor, not too far away from like where we are now, just basically telling us about how medicine is something that you do. It's a job that you have, but it's not who you are as a person. And this is something that I really appreciated hearing. Because sometimes you do lose sight of that a little bit because you spend so much time studying and you spend so much time doing this and that related to medicine. But at the end of the day, it's true. It's not who you are as a person. So like you need to continue these relationships that you have outside of medical school. You need to continue doing the things that make you happy and your hobbies. Because at the end of the day, a job is a job. And like you can be passionate about your job and everything like that, but one day you're gonna have to retire, right? Whether you retire by choice or they kick you out, I don't know, that's your business, that ain't my business. But you don't want to retire one day and then just not have any sense of purpose in your life or have any relationships in your life. So like it's important now to just internalize the idea that like medicine is just something that you do, but it's not who you are entirely as a person. So that's something that I feel like it's easy to lose sight of, and that's something that I definitely want to continue like fostering those relationships outside of medicine. I don't think I did too good of a job in my first semester, but I'm also trying to cut myself some slack because it was just my first semester of medical school. But moving on, I do want to make sure that I'm fostering those relationships that I have outside of medical school with my family, my friends, just people who have mentored me up until this point who are no longer here in this space. Just making sure that I hold on to those connections. I talked about this a lot in a previous video, but failure happens in medical school. Not a lot of people talk about it. And that's a huge part of why I do talk about it on my channel, because it sucks when you feel like you're alone in the situation. And I don't think that people should feel like they're alone when they fail an exam or they fail a class, yada yada, because it's just something that people are uncomfortable talking about, but it's not a unique topic that, you know, doesn't happen, because it does happen. So that's a huge part of like why I make these videos, because like I want to show a different perspective, and like I think that that's what every YouTube channel should be bringing, like their perspective and their experience through medical school. And this just so happens to be mine. I failed before. I failed in medical school. And hey, this is probably not the last time I'm gonna fail in life. So just kind of taking it on the chin sometimes and moving forward, and other times just taking time to reflect on what went wrong and then moving forward in that regard. That has been like a huge part of this semester for me. Because some people will struggle and they will fight like tooth and nail through their didactic years, so I've heard from my faculty advisor. And then once they get to their clinical years where they are in the hospital actually learning and talking to patients and stuff like that, that's where they thrive. And I'm just like, you know what, maybe that's me. And even if it's not me, I'll thrive one day, somehow. I'll find a way. Another thing that I've almost entirely changed my mind on is just the idea of research. I didn't come into medical school with a heavy research background. And parts of me, like now that I have gotten onto a few research projects and I'm slowly working my way through this research world, I do wish that I did a little bit more research and got exposed to more research in college and even high school, because I'm finding out that some people got exposed in high school and I'm just like, what? Yeah, but I wish that I had a little bit more of a research background. So if you're not at this stage yet and you're just kind of like going through the motions of, you know, pre-med life, think about getting involved in research and think about taking on roles where like you have more responsibilities in research, because that has a lot to do with the confidence that you have when you do get to medical school and you do have research projects available to you. But if you don't have any research experience, you might feel like, oh no, I don't know about this. I don't know if I can join this. Because yeah, sometimes PIs and like people who will mentor you through research, like they expect you to know things. So that's been an interesting experience. But at the end of the day, like I have realized that, like your attitude towards it is more important than like what you actually know about it. And the last thing that I've realized is like research years. At first I was completely against the whole idea of taking a research year, the whole idea of making medical school into 5 years instead of 4 years. But after like the academic struggles and things like that, the idea of a research year has been more and more appealing every day. Not only because it helps like strengthen you as an applicant if you're able to be productive in that year and just like really focus on starting a project, seeing it to completion, publishing a project, and just being productive in that manner. But also, it's nice to take a break. And that's what I've heard from a lot of doctors when they talk about like research years in residency and in medical school. They're just kind of like, you know, sometimes in life you need a breather. And that's what a research year can provide you. Just a year where you don't have to go on 3 hours of sleep every night, and you can just kind of focus on a project and make your own schedule, start a family, things like that. So going into medical school, I was like, heck no to these research years and all of this extra stuff. I just want to get through this path and get out of here. But now I'm thinking like, that's a good idea. And I really like the way that sounds, because at the end of the day, like in the grand scheme of things, one more year in medical school, is that really going to make a huge difference in my life? I hope not, and I don't think so. Slowly but surely, I'm realizing like my timeline is my timeline. Like I'm always saying, like, you know, don't compare yourself to other people, just be yourself, yada yada yada. But like I'm also still working on internalizing that whole idea of like my timeline is my timeline. Biggest thing from the semester, it's a learning process, and hopefully moving into the next semester, I'm hoping that I can start previewing lectures more. I'm hoping that I can have a steady schedule and start waking up at a decent time, going to sleep at a decent time. Like those are my main goals. I'm not gonna make incredibly lofty goals that, you know, I might not be able to make, but just taking it day by day. So those have been my main takeaways from my first semester in medical school. We're done. We survived. We came out with a few cuts and bruises, but we survived. So it's been quite a journey, and I can't thank enough like the people who have supported me throughout this process. It really takes a village to raise a child, and it also takes a village to get somebody through medical school. That's what I've realized. Yeah, but it has, as hard as it's been this semester, it has been amazing, and just the journey of a lifetime getting started. So if you are applying to medical schools right now, and if you are thinking about enrolling soon or thinking about applying at a future time, just know that it's hard going through the application process, being a pre-med, but on the other side, as hard as it gets over here, it's better than being over there. It is. And as hard as it is, I've been really enjoying my time in medical school. A huge part of that is because of the people that I'm around. Let's not lie about it. And also because when I watch my medical dramas, every so often I pick up on what they're saying and I understand exactly what they're saying, and that's kind of cool too. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop rambling now because y'all have heard enough about my life. But I'm so grateful to everybody who has been supporting me on this journey, because y'all mean so much to me. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do think about subscribing to my channel. Like this video, comment below, let me know what you think. Because I actually really do care. So again, thank y'all for joining me, and I hope to see you next time.